Being himself childless, it was his openly expressed desire that the whole countryside should, within his own lifetime, prove by his good fortune and many will have personal reasons for bewailing his untimely end. His generous donations to local and country charities have been frequently chronicled in these columns. The circumstances connected with the death of Sir Charles cannot be said to have been entirely cleared up by the inquest, but at least enough has been done to dispose of those rumors to which local superstition has given rise. There is no reason whatever to suspect foul play, or to imagine that death could be from any but natural causes. Sir Charles was a widower, and a man who may be said to have been in some ways of an eccentric habit of mind. In spite of his considerable wealth, he was simple in his personal tastes, and his inter servants at Baskerville Hall consisted of a married couple named Barrymore, the husband acting as butler and the wife as housekeeper. Their evidence, corroborated by that of several friends, tends to show that Sir Charles's health has been for some time impaired, and points specially to some affection of the heart, maintaining itself in changes of color, breathlessness, and acute attacks of nervous depression. Dr. James Mortimer, the friend and medical attendant of the deceased, has given evidence to the same effect. The facts of the case are simple. Sir Charles Baskerville was in the habit of every night before going to bed of walking down the famous yew alley of Baskerville Hall. The evidence of the Barrymore shows that this had been his custom. On the 4th of May, Sir Charles had declared his intention of starting next day for London, and had ordered Barrymore to prepare his luggage. That night he went out as usual for his nocturnal walk, in the course of which he was in the habit of smoking a cigar. He never returned. At 12 o'clock, Barrymore, finding the hall door still open, became alarmed, and lighting a lantern, went in search of his master. The day had been wet, and Sir Charles's footmarks were easily traced down the alley. Halfway down this walk there is a gate which leads out on to the moor. There was indications that Sir Charles has stood for some little time here. He then proceeded down the alley, and it was at the far end of this that his body was discovered. One fact which has not been explained is the statement of Barrymore that his master's footprints altered their character from the time that he passed the Moorgate, and that he appeared from thence onward to have been walking upon his toes. One Murphy, a gipsy horse dealer, was on the moor at no great distance at the time, but he appears by his own confession to have been the worse for drink. He declares that he heard cries, but is unable to state from what direction they came. No signs of violence were to be discovered upon Sir Charles's person, and though the doctor's evidences pointed to an almost incredible facial distortion, so great that Dr. Mortimer refused at first to believe that it was indeed his friend and patient who lay upon him, it was explained that is a symptom which is not unusual in cases of dyspnea and death from cardiac exhaustion. This explanation was borne out by postmortem examination, which showed long-standing organic disease, and the coroner's jury returned a verdict in accordance with the medical evidence. It is well that this is so, for it is obviously of the utmost importance that Sir Charles's hair should settle at the Hall, and continue the good work which has been so sadly interrupted. Had the prosaic finding of the coroner not finally put an end to the romantic stories which has been whispered in connection with the affair, it might have been difficult to find a tenant for Baskerville Hall. It is understood that the next kin is Mr. Henry Baskerville, if he is still alive, the son of Sir Charles Baskerville's younger brother. The young man, when last heard, was in America, and inquiries are being instituted with a view to informing him of his good fortune. Dr. Mortimer refolded his paper and replaced it in his pocket. Those are the public facts, Mr. Holmes, in connection with the death of Sir Charles Baskerville. I must thank you, Sherlock Holmes, said Sherlock Holmes, for calling my attention to a case which certainly presents some features of interest. I have observed some newspaper comment at the time, but I was exceedingly preoccupied by that little affair of the Vatican cameos, and in my anxiety to oblige the Pope, I lost touch with several interesting English cases. This article, you say, contains all the public facts. It does. Then let me have the private ones. He leaned back, put his fingertips together, and assumed his most impassive and judicial expression. In doing so, said Dr. Mortimer, who had begun to show signs of some strong emotion, I am telling that which I have not confided to anyone. My motive for withholding it from the coroner's inquiry is that a man of science shrinks from placing himself in the public position of seeming to endorse a popular superstition. I had the further motive that Baskerville Hall, as the paper says, would certainly remain untenanted if anything were done to increase its already rather grim reputation. For both these reasons, I thought that I was justified in telling rather less than I knew, since no practical good could result from it. But with you there is no reason why I should not be perfectly frank. The moor is very sparsely inhabited, and those who live near each other are thrown very much together. For this reason I saw a good deal of Sir Charles Baskerville, with the exception of Mr. Frankland, of Lafter Hall, and Mr. Stapleton, the naturalist. There are no other men of education within many miles. Sir Charles was a retiring man, but the chance of his illness brought us together, and a community of interest in science kept us so. He had brought back much scientific information from South Africa, and many a charming evening we have spent together discussing the comparative anatomy of the bushman and the Hottentot. Within the last few months it became increasingly plain to me that Sir Charles's nervous system was strained to the breaking point. He had taken this legend which I had read you exceedingly to heart, so much so that although he would walking his own grounds, nothing would induce him to go out upon the moor at night. Incredible as it may appear to you, Mr. Holmes, he was honestly convinced that a dreadful fate overhung his family, and certainly the records which he was able to give of his ancestors were not encouraging. The idea of some ghastly presence constantly haunted him, and on no more than one occasion he has asked me whether I had on my medical journals at night ever seen any strange creature or heard the baying of a hound. The latter question he put to me several times, and always with a voice which vibrated with excitement. I can well remember driving up to his house in the evening, some 3 weeks before the fatal event. He chanced to be at his hall door. I had descended from my gig and was standing in front of him, when I saw his eyes fix themselves over my shoulder and stare past me with an expression of the most dreadful horror. I whisked round and just time to catch a glimpse of something which I took to be a large black calf passing at the head of the drive. So excited and alarmed was he that I was compelled to go down to the spot where the animal had been and look around for it. It was gone, however, and the incident appeared to make the worst impression upon his mind. I stayed with him all the evening, and it was on the occasion to explain the emotion which he had shown that he confided to my keeping that narrative which I read to you when first I came. I mention this small episode because I assure some importance in view of the tragedy which followed, but I was convinced at the time that the master was entirely trivial and that his excitement had no justification. It was my advice that Sir Charles was about to go to London. His heart was, I knew, affected, and the constant anxiety in which he lived, however chimerical the cause of it might be, was evidently having a serious effect upon his health. I thought that a few months among the distractions of town would send him back a new man. Mr. Stapleton, a mutual friend who was much concerned at his state of health, was of the same opinion that the last instant came this terrible catastrophe. On the night of Sir Charles's death, Barrymore, the butler who made the discovery, sent Parkins, the groom, on horseback to me, and as I was sitting up late, I was able to reach Baskerville Hall within an hour of the event. I checked and corroborated all the facts which were mentioned at the inquest. I followed the footstep down the yew alley. I saw the spot at the moor gate where he seemed to have fainted. I remarked the change in the shape of the prints which after that point I noted there were no other footsteps save those of Barrymore on the soft gravel, and finally I carefully examined the body which had not been touched until my arrival. Sir Charles lay on his face, his arms out, his fingers dug into the ground, and his features convulsed with some strong emotion to such an extent that I could hardly have sworn to his identity. There was certainly no physical injury of any kind, but one false statement was made by Barrymore at the inquest. He said that there were no traces upon the ground round the body. He did not observe any, but I did, some little distance off, but fresh and clear. Footprints, footprints. A man's or a woman's. Mr. Mortimer looked strangely at us for an instant, and his voice shrank almost to a whisper as he answered, "Mr. Holmes, they're the footprints of a gigantic hound." Chapter 3. The Problem. I confess that at these words a shudder passed through me. There was a thrill in the doctor's voice, which showed that he was himself deeply moved by that which he told us. Holmes leaned forward in his excitement, and his eyes had the hard, dry glitter which shot from them which he was keenly interested. "You saw this as clearly as I see you, and you said nothing. What was the use? How was it that no one else saw it? The marks were some 20 yards from the body, and no one gave them a thought. I don't suppose I should have done so had I not known this legend. There are many sheepdogs on the moor, no doubt, but this was no sheepdog. You say it was large, enormous, but it had not approached the body. No. What sort of night was it? Damp and raw, but not actually rainy. No. What is the alley like? There are 2 lines of old yew hedge, 12 feet high and impenetrable. The walk in the central is about 8 feet across." "Is there anything between the hedge and the walk?" "Yes, there is a strip of grass about 6 feet broad on either side. I understood that a yew hedge is penetrated at one point by a gate." "Yes, the wicket gate which leads on to the moor." "Is there any other opening?" "None, so that to reach the yew alley one either has to come down it from the house, or else to enter it by the moor gate. There is an exit through a summer house at the far end." "Has Sir Charles reached this?" "No, he lay about 50 yards from it." "Now tell me, Dr. Mortimer, and this is important, the marks which you saw were on the path and not on the grass." "No marks could show on the grass." "Were they on the same side of the path as the moor gate?" "Yes, they were on the edge of the path, on the same side as the moor gate." You interest me exceedingly. Another point. Was the wicket gate closed? Closed and padlocked. How high was it? About 4 feet high. Then anyone could have got over it. Yes. What marks did you see by the wicket gate? None in particular. Good heaven! Did no one examine? Yes, I examined myself, and I found nothing. It was all very confused. Sir Charles had evidently stood there for 5 or 10 minutes. How do you know that? Because the ash had twice dropped from his cigar. Excellent. This is a colleague, Watson, after our own heart, but the marks. He had left his own marks all over that small patch of gravel. I could discern no others. Sherlock Holmes stuck his head against his knee with an impatient gesture. If I had only been there, he cried. It is evidently a case of extraordinary interest, and one which presented immense opportunities to the scientific expert. That gravel page upon which I might have read so much has been long ere his smudged by the rain and defaced by the clocks of curious peasants. Oh, Dr. Mortimer, to think that you should not have called me in! You have indeed much to answer for. I could not call you in, Mr. Holmes, without disclosing these facts to the world, and I have already given my reasons for not wishing to do so. Besides, why do you hesitate? There is a realm in which the most acute and most experienced of detectives is helpless. You mean that the thing is supernatural. I did not positively say so. No, but you evidently think it. Since the tragedy, Mr. Holmes, there have come to my ears several incidents which are hard to reconcile with the settled order of nature. For example, I find that before the terrible event occurred, several people had seen a creature upon the moor which corresponds with this Baskerville demon, and which could not possibly be any animal known to science. They all agreed that it was a huge creature, luminous, ghastly, and spectral. I have cross-examined these men, one of them a hard-headed countryman, one a farrier, and one a moorland farmer, who all tell the same story of his dreadful apparition exactly corresponding to the hellhound of the legend. I assure you that there is a reign of terror in the district, and that it is hardly a man who will cross the moor at night. And you, a trained man of science, believe it to be supernatural. I do not know what to believe. Holmes shrugged his shoulders. I have hitherto confined my investigation to this world, said he. In a modest way I have combated evil, and to take on the father of evil himself would perhaps be too ambitious a task. Yet you must admit that the footmark is material. The original hound was material enough to tug a man's throat out, and yet he was diabolical as well. I see that you have quite gone over to the supernaturalist. And now, Mr. Mortimer, tell me this. If you hold these views, why have you come to consult me at all? You tell me in this same breath that it is useless to investigate Sir Charles's death, and that you desired me to do it. I did not say that I desired you to do it. Then how can I assist you? By advising me as to what I should do with Sir Henry Baskerville, who arrives at Waterloo Station. Dr. Mortimer looked at his watch. In exactly 1 hour and a quarter, he being the heir. Yes, on the death of Sir Charles, we inquired for this young gentleman, and found that he had been farming in Canada. From the accounts which have reached us, he is an excellent fellow in every way. I speak now not as a medical man, but as a trustee and executor of Sir Charles's will. There is no other claimant, I presume. None. The only other kinsman whom we have been able to trace was Roger Baskerville, the youngest of the three brothers, of whom poor Sir Charles was the elder. The second brother, who died young, is the father of this lad Henry. The third, Roger, was a black sheep of the family. He came He came of the old masterful Baskervilles strain and was very image. They tell me of the family picture of old Hugo. He made England too hot to hold him, fled to Central America, and died there in 1876 of yellow fever. Henry is the last of the Baskervilles. In 1 hour and 5 minutes I met him at Waterloo Station. I have had a wire that he arrived at Southampton this morning. Now, Mr. Holmes, what would you advise me to do with him? Why should he not go to the home of his fathers? It seems natural, does it not? And yet consider that every Baskerville who goes there meets with an evil fate. I feel sure that if Sir Charles could have spoken with me before his death, he would have warned me against bringing this, the last of the old race and heir to great wealth, to that deadly place. And yet it cannot be denied that the prosperity of the whole poor bleak countryside depends upon his presence. All the good work which has been done by Sir Charles will crash to the ground if there is no tenant of the hall. I fear lest I should be swayed too much by my own obvious interest in the master, and that is why I bring the case before you and ask for your advice." Holmes considered for a little time. "Put into plain words the matter in this," said he. "In your opinion there is a diabolical agency which makes Dartmoor an unsafe abode for Baskerville. That is your opinion. At least I might go the length of saying that there is some evidence that this may be so." "Exactly. But surely, if your supernatural theory be correct, it could work the young man evil in London as easily as in Devonshire. A devil with merely local powers, like a parish vestry, would be too inconvenienceable a thing. You put the matter more flippantly, Mr. Holmes, than you would probably do if you were brought into personal contact with these things. Your advice, then, as I understand it, is that the young man will be as safe in Devonshire as in London. He comes in 50 minutes. What would you recommend?" "I recommend, sir, that you take a cab, call off your spaniel who is scratching at my front door, and proceed to Waterloo to meet Sir Henry Baskerville, and then you will say nothing to him at all until I have made up my mind about the matter. How long will it take you to make up your mind?" "24 hours. At 10 o'clock tomorrow. Dr. Mortimer, I will be much obliged to you if you will call upon me here, and it will be of help to me in my plans for the future if you will bring such Henry Baskerville with you." "I will do so, Mr. Holmes." He scribbled the appointment on his shirt cuff and hurried off in his strange, peering, absent-minded fashion. Holmes stopped him at the head of the stair. "Only one more question, Dr. Mortimer. You say that before Sir Charles Baskerville's death several people saw his apparition upon the moor." "3 people did." "Did any see it after?" "I have not heard of it any. Thank you. Good morning." Holmes returned to his seat with a quiet look of inward satisfaction which meant that he had a congenial task before him. "Going out, Watson, unless I can help you?" "No, my dear fellow, it is at the hour of action that I turn to you for aid. But this is splendid, really unique from some points of view. When you pass Brandley's, would you ask him to send up a pound of the strongest shag tobacco? Thank you. It would be as well if you could make it convenient not to return before evening. Then I should be very glad to compare impressions as to this most interesting problem which has been submitted to us this morning." I knew that seclusion and solitude were very necessary for my friend in those hours of intense mental concentration during which he weighed every particle of evidence, constructed alternative theories, balanced one against the other, and make up his mind as to which points were essential and which unnatural. I therefore spent the day at my club and did not return to Baker Street until evening. It was nearly 9 o'clock when I found myself in the sitting room once more. My first impression as I opened the door was that a fire had broken out, for the room was so filled with smoke that the light of the lamp upon the table was blurred by it. As I entered, however, my fears were set at rest, for it was the acrid fumes of strong coarse tobacco which took me by the throat and set me coughing. Through the haze I had a vague vision of Holmes in his dressing gown, curled up in an armchair with his black clay pipe between his lips. Several rolls of paper lay around him. "Cough cold, Watson," said he. "No, it's this poisonous atmosphere. I suppose it's pretty thick, now that you mention it." "Thick! It is intolerable. Open the window, then. You have been at your club all day, I perceive. My dear Holmes, am I right?" "Certainly. But how?" He laughed at my bewildered expression. "There is a delightful freshness about you, Watson, which makes it a pleasure to exercise my small powers which I possess at your expense. A gentleman goes forth on a showery and miry day. He returns immaculate in the evening, with a glove still on his hat and his boots. He has been a fixture there for all day. He is not a man with intimate friends. Where then could he have been? It is not obvious. Well, it is rather obvious. The world is full of obvious things which nobody by any chance ever observes. Why do you think that I have been a fixture also? On the contrary, I have been to Devonshire. In spirit, exactly. My body has remained in this armchair, and has, I regret to observe, consumed in my absence 2 large pots of coffee and an incredible amount of tobacco. After you left, I went down to Stamford's for the ordnance map of this portion of the moor, and my spirit has hovered over it all day. I flatter myself that I could find my way about. A large scale map, I presume. Very large. He unrolled one section and held it over his knee. "Here you have the particular district which concerns us, that is Baskerville Hall in the middle, with a wood around it. Exactly. I fancy the yew alley, though not marked under the name, much stretch along this line, with a moor, as you perceive, upon the right of it. The small clump of buildings here is the hamlet of Grimpen, which our friend Dr. Mortimer has his headquarters. Within a radius of 5 miles there are, as you see, only a few scattered dwellings. Here is the Laughter Hall which is mentioned in the narrative. There is a house indicated here which may be the residence of the naturalist. Stapleton, if I remember right, was his name. Here are 2 moorland farmhouses, Hightor and Falmire. Then 14 miles away the great convict prison of Princetown. Between and around the scattered points extend the desolate, lifeless moor. This, then, is the stage upon which tragedy has been played, and upon which we may help to play it again. It must be a wild place. Yes, the setting is a worthy one, if the devil did desire to have a hand in the affairs of men. Then you are yourself inclining to the supernatural explanation. The devil's agents may be of flesh and blood, may they not? There are 2 questions waiting for us at the outset. The one is whether any crime has been committed at all. The second is, what is the crime, and how was it committed? Of course, if Dr. Mortimer's surmise should be correct, and we are dealing with forces outside the ordinary laws of nature, there is an end of our investigation, that we are bound to exhaust all other hypothesis before falling back upon this one. I think we will shut that window again, if you don't mind. It's a singular thing, but I find that a concentrated atmosphere helps concentration of thought. I have not pushed it to the length of getting into a box to think that it is the logical outcome of my convictions. Have you turned the case over in your mind? Yes, I have thought a good deal of it in the course of the day. What do you make of it? It is very bewildering. It has certainly a character of its own. There are points of distinction about it. The change in the footprints, for example, what do you make of it? Of that, Mortimer said that the man had walked on tiptoe down that portion of the alley. He only repealed what some fool had said at the inquest. Why should a man walk on tiptoe down the alley? What then? He was running, Watson, running desperately, running for his life, running until he burst his heart and fell dead upon his face. Running from what? There lies our problem. There are indications that the man was crazed with fear before ever he began to run. How can you say that? I'm presuming that the cause of his fears came to him across the moor. If that were so, and if it seems most probable, only a man who had lost his wits would have run from the house instead of towards it. If the gypsy's evidence may be taken as true, he ran with cries for help in the direction where help has least likely to be. Then again, whom was he waiting for that night, and why was he waiting for him in the yew alley rather than in his own house? You think that he was waiting for someone. The man was elderly and infirm. We can understand his taking an evening stroll, but the ground was damp and the night inclement. Is it natural that he should stand for 5 or 10 minutes, as Dr. Mortimer, with more practical sense than I should have given him credit for, deduced from the cigar ash? But he went out every evening. I think it unlikely that he waited at the moor gate every evening. On the contrary, the evidence is that he avoided the more. That night he waited there. It is the night before he made his departure for London. That thing takes shape. Watson, it becomes coherent. Might I ask you to hand me my violin, and I will postpone all further thought upon this business until we have had the advantage of meeting Dr. Mortimer and Sir Henry Baskerville in the morning. Chapter 4. Sir Henry Baskerville. Our breakfast table was cleared early, and Henry waited in his dressing gown for the promised interview. Our clients were punctual to their appointment, for the clock had just struck 10. Then Dr. Mortimer was shown up, followed by the young baronet. The latter was a small, alert, dark-eyed man about 30 years of age, very sturdily built, with thick black eyebrows and a strong, pugnacious face. He wore a ruddy-tinted suede suit, and had the weather-beaten appearance of one who has spent most of his time in the open air. And yet there was something in his steady eye and the quiet assurance of his bearing which indicated the gentleman. "This is Sir Henry Baskerville," said Dr. Mortimer. "Why, yes," said he, "and the strange thing is, Mr. Sharlock Holmes, that if my friend here had not postponed coming round to you this morning, I should have come on my own account. I understand that you think out little puzzles, and I have had one this morning which wants more thinking out than I am able to give it." "Pray take a seat, Sir Henry. Do I understand you to say that you have yourself had some remarkable experiences since your arrival in London?" "Nothing of much importance, Mr. Holmes. Only a joke, as like as not. It is this letter, if you can call it a letter, which reached me this morning." He laid an envelope upon the table, and we all bent over it. It was of common quality, greyish in colour. The address, Sir Henry Baskerville, North Northumberland Hotel was printed in rough characters, the postmark Charing Cross, and the date of posting the preceding evening. Who knew that you were going to the Northumberland Hotel? Asked Holmes, glancing keenly across at our visitor. No one could have known. We only decided after I met Dr. Mortimer. But Dr. Mortimer was no doubt already stopping there. No, I had been staying with a friend, said the doctor. There was no possible indication that we intended to go to this hotel. Hum. Someone seems to be very deeply interested in your movements. Out of the envelope he took a half sheet of foolscap paper folded into four. This he opened and spread flat upon the table. Across the middle of it, a single sentence had been formed by the expedient of pasting printed words upon it. It ran: as you value life for your reason, keep away from the moor. The word moor only was printed in ink. Now, said Sir Henry Baskerville, perhaps you will tell me, Mr. Holmes, what in thunder is the meaning of that, and who it is that takes so much interest in my affairs. What do you make of it, Dr. Mortimer? You must allow that there is nothing supernatural about this, at any rate. No, sir, but it might very well come from someone who was convinced that the business is supernatural. What business? Asked Sir Henry sharply. It seems to me that all your gentlemen know a great deal more than I do about my own affairs. You shall share our knowledge before you leave this room, Sir Henry. I promise you that, says Sherlock Holmes. We will confine ourselves for the present, with our permission, to this very interesting document, which must have been put together and posted yesterday evening. Have you yesterday's Times, Watson? It is here in the corner. Might I trouble you for it? The inside page, please, with the leading articles. He glanced swiftly over it, running his eyes up and down the columns. Capital article this on free trade. Permit me to give you an extract from it. You may be cajoled into imagining that your own special trade or your own industry will be encouraged by a protective tariff, but it stands to reason that such legislation must in the long run keep away wealth from the country, diminish the value of our imports, and lower the general conditions of life in this island. What do you think of that, Watson? Cried Holmes in high glee, rubbing his hands together with satisfaction. Don't you think that is an admirable statement? Dr. Mortimer looked at Holmes with an air of professional interest, and Sir Henry Baskerville turned a pair of puzzled dark eyes upon me. I don't know much about the tariff and things of that kind, said he, but it seems to me we have got a bit of the trail so far as that note is concerned. On the contrary, I think we are particularly hot upon the trail. Sir Henry Watson here knows more about the methods than you do, but I hear that even he has not quite grasped the significance of the statement sentence. No, I confess that I see no connection. And yet, my dear Watson, there is so very close a connection that the one is extracted out of the other. Your life, reason, value, keep away from the. Don't you see now whence these words have been taken? By thunder, you're right. Well, if that isn't smart, cried Sir Henry. If any possible doubt remained, it is settled by the fact that keep away and from the are cut in one piece. Well now, so it is. Really, Mr. Holmes, this exceeds anything which I could have imagined, said Dr. Mortimer, gazing at my friend in amazement. I could understand anyone saying that the words were from a newspaper, but that you should name which and that it came from the leading article. It's really one of the most remarkable things which I have ever known. How did you do it? I presume, doctor, that you could tell the skull of a negrut from that of an Esquimau. Most certainly, but how? Because that is my special hobby. The differences are obvious. the supraorbital crest, the facial angle, the maxillary curve, but this is my special hobby and the difference are clearly obvious. There is much indifference to my eyes between the leaded bourgeois type of a Times article and the slovenly print of an evening halfpenny paper as there could be between your Negro and Esquimau. The detention of Times is one of the most elementary branches of knowledge to the special expert in crime, though I confess that once when I was very young I confused the Leeds Mercury with Western Morning News, but Times leader is entirely distinctive, and these words could have been taken from nothing else, and as it was done yesterday, the strong probability was that we should find the words in yesterday's issue. So far as I can follow you, then, Mr. Holmes, said Sir Henry Baskerville, someone cut out this message with a scissors. Nail scissors, said Holmes. You can see that it was a very short bladed scissors, since the cutter had to take two snips over to keep away. That is so. Someone then cut out the message with a pair of short bladed scissors, pasted it with paste. Gum, said Holmes, with gum onto the paper, but I want to know why the word more should have been written, because he could not find it in print. The other words were all simple and might be found in any issue, but more would be less common. Why, of course, that would explain it. Have you read anything else in the message, Mr. Holmes? There are one or two indications, and yet the utmost pains have been taken to remove all clues. The address, you observe, is printed in rough characters, but the Times is a paper which is seldom found in any hands but those of highly educated. We may take it, therefore, that the letter was composed by an educated man who wished to pose as an uneducated one, and his effort to conceal his own writing suggests that the writing might be known or come to be known by you. Again, you will observe that the words are not gummed on in an accurate line, that some are much higher than others. Life, for example, is quite out of the proper place. That might point to carelessness, or it may point to agitation and hurry upon the part of the cutter. On the whole, I incline to the latter view, since the matter was evidently important. It is unlikely that the composer of such a letter would be careless. If he were in a hurry, it opens up the interesting question why he should be in a hurry, since any letter posted up to early morning would reach Sir Henry before he would leave his hotel. Did the composer fear an interruption, and from whom? We are coming now rather into the region of guesswork, said Dr. Mortimer. Say rather into the region where we balance probabilities and choose the most likely. It is the scientific use of the imagination, but we have always some material basis on which to start our speculation. Now you would call it a guess, no doubt, but I am almost certain that this address has been written in Hodel. How in the world can you say that? If you examine it carefully, you will see that both the pen and the ink have given the writer trouble. The pen had spluttered twice in a single word, and has run dry 3 times in a short address, showing that there was very little ink in the bottle. Now a private pen or ink bottle is seldom allowed in such a state, and the combination of the two must be quite rare. But you know the hotel ink and the hotel pen varieties rare to get anything else. Yes, I have very little hesitation in saying that could we examine the waste paper baskets of the hotels around Charing Cross until we found the remains of the mutilated Times leader, we could lay our hands straight upon the person who sent this singular message. Hullo, hullo, what is this?" He was carefully examining the foolscap upon which the words were pasted, holding it only an inch or two from his eyes. "Well, nothing," said he, throwing it down. "It is a blank half sheet of paper, without even a watermark upon it. I think we have drawn as much as we can from this curious letter. And now, Sir Henry, has anything else of interest happened to you since you have been in London?" "Why, no, Mr. Holmes, I think not." "You have not observed any one follow or watch you?" "I seem to have walked right into the thick of a dime novel," said our visitor. "Why in thunder should anyone follow or watch me?" "We are coming to that. You have nothing else to report to us before we go into this matter?" "Well, it depends upon what you think worth reporting." "I think anything out of the ordinary routine of life well worth reporting." Sir Henry smiled. "I don't know much of British life yet, for I have spent nearly all my time in the States and in Canada. But I hope that to lose one of your boats is not part of the ordinary routine of life over here." "You have lost one of your boats, my dear sir," cried Dr. Mortimer. "It is only mislaid. You will find it when you return to the hotel. What is the use of troubling Mr. Holmes with trifles of this kind?" "Well, he asked me for anything outside the ordinary routine." "Exactly," said Holmes. "However foolish the incident may seem, you have lost one of your boots, you say. Well, mislaid it anyhow. I put them out both outside my door last night, and there was only one in the morning. I could get no sense of the chap who cleans them. The worst of it is that I only bought the pair last night in the Strand, and I have never had them on. If you have never worn them, why did you put them out to be cleaned?" "They were 10 boots, and had never been vanished. That was why I put them out." "Then I understand that on your arrival in London yesterday you went out at once and bought a pair of boots." "I did a good deal of shopping. Dr. Mortimer here went round with me. You see, if I am to be squared down there, I must dress the part, and it may be that I have got a little careless in my ways out west. Among other things, I bought these brown boots, gave $6 for them, and had one stolen before ever I had them on my feet." "It seems a singularly useless thing to steal," said Sharlock. "Holmes, I confess that I share Dr. Mortimer's belief that it will not be long before the missing boat is found. And now, gentlemen," said the baronet with decision, "it seems to me that I have spoken quite enough about the little I know. It is time that you kept your promise and gave me a full account of what you are driving at." "What we are driving at? Your request is a very reasonable one," Holmes answered. "Dr. Mortimer, I think you could not do better than to tell your story as you told it to us." This encouraged, our scientific friend drew his papers from his pocket and presented the whole case as he had done upon the morning before. Sir Henry Baskerville listened with the deepest attention and with an occasional exclamation of surprise. "Well, I seem to have come into an inheritance with a vengeance," said he when the long narrative was finished. "Of course I have heard of the Hound ever since I was in the nursery. It is a pet story of the family, though I never thought of taking it seriously before. As to my uncle's death, well, it is all seems boiling up in my head, and I cannot get it clear yet. You don't seem quite to have made up your mind whether it's a case for a policeman or a clergyman." "Precisely. And now there is the affair of the latter at the hotel. I suppose that it fits into the place." "It seems to show that someone knows more than we do about what goes on upon the moon," said Dr. Mortimer. "And also," said Holmes, "that someone is not ill disposed towards you, since they warn you of danger. Or it may be that they wish for their own purposes to scare me away." Well, of course, that is possible also. I'm very much indebted to you, Dr. Mortimer, for introducing me to a problem which presents several interesting alternatives. But the practical point which we now have to decide, Sir Henry, is whether it is or it is not advisable for you to go to Baskerville Hall. Why should I not go? There seems to be danger. Do you mean danger from this family fiend, or do you mean danger from human beings? Well, that is what we have to find out. Whichever it is, my answer is fixed. There is no devil in hell, Mr. Holmes, and there is no man upon earth who can prevent me from going to the home of my own people, and you may take that to be my final answer. His dark brows knitted, and his face flushed to a dusky red as he spoke. It is evident that the fiery temper of the Baskervilles was not extinct in this their last representative. Meanwhile, said he, I had hardly had time to think over all that you have told me. It is a big thing for a man to have understand and to decide at one sitting. I should like to have a quiet hour by myself to make up my mind. Now look here, Mr. Holmes, it's 11:30 now, and I am going back right away to my hotel. Suppose you and your friend Dr. Watson come round and lunch with us at two. I'll be able to tell you more clearly than how this thing strikes me. Is that convenient to you, Watson? Perfectly. Then you may expect us. Shall I have a cab called? I would prefer to walk, for their affair has flurried me rather. I will join you in a walk with pleasure, said his companion. Then we meet again at 2 o'clock. Au revoir, and good morning. We heard the steps of our visitors descend the stair and the bang of the front door. In the instant Holmes had changed from the languid dreamer to a man of action. Your hat and boots, Watson, quick! Not a moment to lose. He rushed into his room in his dressing gown and back again in a few seconds in a frock coat. We hurried together down the stairs and into the street. Dr. Mortimer and Baskerville were still visible about 200 yards ahead of us in the direction of Oxford Street. Shall I run on and stop them? Not for the world, my dear Watson. I'm perfectly satisfied with your company, if you will tolerate mine. Our friends are wise, for it is certainly a very fine morning for a walk. He quickened his pace quite until we had decreased the distance which divided us by about half. Then, still keeping 100 yards behind, we followed it into Oxford Street and so down Regent Street. Once our friend stopped and stared into a shop window upon which Holmes did the same. An instant afterwards he gave a little cry of satisfaction, and following the direction of his eager eyes, I saw that a hansom cab with a man inside, which had halted on the other side of the street, was now proceeding slowly onward again. There is our man, Watson. Come along, we have a good look at him, if we can do no more. At that instant I was aware of a bushy black beard and a pair of piercing eyes turning upon us through the side window of the cab. Instantly the trap-door at the top flew up. Something was streamed to the driver, and the cab flew madly off down Regent Street. Holmes looked eagerly round for another, but no empty one was in sight. Then he dashed in wild pursuit amid the stream of the traffic, but the start was too great, and already the cab was out of sight. There now, said Holmes bitterly as he emerged, panting and white with vexation from the tide of vehicles. Was ever such bad luck, and such bad management too? Watson, Watson, if you are an honest man, you will record this also and set it against my successes. Who was the man? I have not an idea. A spy? Well, it was evident from what we have heard that Baskerville has been very closely shadowed by someone since he has been in town. How else could it be known so quickly that it was the Northumberland Hotel which he had chosen? If they had followed him with the first day, I argued that they would follow him also the second. You may have observed that I twice strolled over to the window while Dr. Mortimer was reading his legend. Yes, I remember. I was looking out for loiterers in the street, but I saw none. We are dealing with a clever man, Watson. This matter cuts very deep, and though I have not finally made up my mind whether it is a benevolent or a malevolent agency which is in touch with us, I am conscious always of power and design. When our friends left, I at once followed them in the hopes of marking down their invisible agenda. So wily was he that he had not trusted himself upon foot, but he had availed himself of a cab so that he could loiter behind or dash past them so escape their notice. His method had the additional advantage that if they were to take a cab, he was all ready to follow them. It was, however, one obvious disadvantage. It puts him in the power of the cabman. Exactly. What is a pity we did not get the number. My dear Watson, clumsy as I have been, you surely do not seriously imagine that I neglected to get the number. Number 2704 is our man, but that is no use to us for the moment. I fail to see how you have had done more. On observing the cab, I should have instantly turned and walked in the other direction. I should then, at my leisure, have hired a second cab and followed the first at a respectful distance, or better still, have driven to the Northumberland Hotel and waited there. When our unknown had followed Baskerville home, we should have had the opportunity of playing his own game upon himself and seeing where he made for, as it is, by an indiscreet eagerness, which was taken advantage of with extraordinary quickness and energy by our opponent, we have betrayed ourselves and lost our man. We have been sauntering slowly down Regent Street during this conversation, and Dr. Mortimer, with his companion, had long vanished in front of us. "There is no object in our following them," said Holmes. "The shadow has departed, and will not return. We must see what further cards we have in our hands, and play them with decision. Could you swear to that man's face within the cab?" I could swear only to the bird, and so could I, from which I gathered that in all probability it was a false one. A clever man upon so delicate an errand has no use for a bird save to conceal his features. Come in here, Watson. He turned into one of the district messenger offices, where he was warmly greeted by the manager. "Ah, Wilson, I see you have not forgotten the little case in which I had the good fortune to help you." "No, sir, indeed I have not. You saved my good name, and perhaps my life." "My dear fellow, you exaggerate. I have some recollection, Wilson, that you have among your boys a lad named Cartwright, who showed some ability during the investigation." "Yes, sir, he is still with us. Could you ring him up? Thank you, and I should be glad to have change of this £5 note." A lad of 14 with a bright, keen face had obeyed the summons of the manager. He stood now gazing with a great reverence at the famous detective. "Let me have the hotel directory," said Holmes. "Thank you. Now, Cartwright, there are the names of 23 hotels here, all in the immediate neighborhood of Charing Cross. Do you see? Yes, sir. You will visit each of these in turn. Yes, sir. You will begin in each case by giving the outside porter 1 shilling. Here are 23 shillings. Yes, sir. You will tell him that you want to see the waste paper of yesterday. You will say that an important telegram has miscarried and that you are looking for it. You understand?" "Yes, sir. But what you are really looking for is the center page of the Times with some holes cut in it with scissors. Here is a copy of the Times. It is this page. You could easily recognize it, could you not?" "Yes, sir." "In each case the outside porter will send for the hall porter, to whom also you will say give 1 shilling. Here are 23 shillings. You will then learn in possibly 20 cases outside 23 that the waste of the day before has been burned or removed. In the 3 other cases, you will be shown a heap of paper, and you will look for this page of the Times among it. The odds are enormously against your finding it. There are 10 shillings over in case of emergencies. Let me have a report by wire at Baker Street before evening. And now, Watson, it only remains for us to find out by wire the identity of the cabman, number 2704, and then we will drop into one of the Bond Street picture galleries and fill in the time until we are due at the hotel.